something like 1,300, 1,200, 1,100. We're not sure. I've written down 14 to 13, but it could be 1,200. But somewhere close to 1,300, the Phoenicians invent alphabetic writing. And the invention of alphabetic writing, certainly complete by 1,000, so you can come closer to us if you want to, just to be sure, but by 1,000 for sure. The invention of alphabetic writing taking place in present-day Lebanon, so meaning right next door to Israel. The invention of alphabetic writing is one of the other most important things that human culture experiences, because alphabetic writing is easy. Well, I shouldn't say that, should I? Because the present-day students in our schools are having a terrible problem with it. But theoretically, alphabetic writing is easy, and it's certainly easier than hieroglyphs or some of the other character-based writing. So the breakthrough into alphabetic writing, and around certainly by 1,000 in Lebanon, will have implications for everybody in all directions around their neighborhood. Number one, for the Jews, and number two, for the Greeks. Both cultures are close to the Phoenicians. Both cultures are in contact with the Phoenicians, and both cultures will benefit from alphabetic writing. Now remember, inventing alphabetic writing doesn't matter what language you're speaking. You get that, everybody here in the room? Get that? It doesn't matter what language you're speaking. The alphabet works for you, whatever language you're speaking, because the alphabet is based on sounds, and you reproduce those sounds, and then whatever those are, the alphabet works. So, very important for us here tonight is to realize that somewhere around the year 1000, in both that southeast corner of Israel and the northeast corner of Greece, in both places, someone, or multiple someones, decide to write things down using this new alphabetic writing, things that they have been passing down orally for maybe as long as 1,000 years. So this is very important, since we're talking about the basis in Greece and the basis in Israel here tonight. We care about the fact that both these cultures will have access to this new tool at about the same time. And both cultures will do the same thing at about the same time. That is, they will write down their story that they've been holding orally for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So in other words, I'm going to talk about who wrote the Bible later here. And when we get to that question, who wrote the Bible, whole questions will come up about, oh, wait, didn't Moses get all the words just handed right to him? Well, remember, there can be an oral tradition for hundreds and hundreds of years before someone writes it down. And that doesn't mean what they're writing down is wrong. In fact, all of our studies in contemporary studies on oral tradition, which have been done in mountain cultures, there was a great one done in the mountain cultures of Yugoslavia, and they showed that generation after generation could hand down a poem of thousands of lines perfectly remembered without a single mistake, that it could be handed down to trained rhetors generation after generation accurately and never written down accurately. So therefore, later when we talk about ancient Israel literature and ancient Greek literature, remember, both cultures choose to do the same thing at about the same time using the same alphabet that they both have obtained from Phoenicia. Okay? So somewhere around 1000 we have for sure alphabetic writing that originates in Lebanon and then spreads to every place else. Now, at the bottom of our chart here is Moses leads the Exodus, and here's a painting of it in the Sistine Chapel. Many of you know that the popes invited various artists to come to Rome and paint panels, very large panels, where these figures are almost life-size, frescoes, of the various stories of the Old Testament, including Moses leading his people across the Red Sea. And so here we have Cosimo Rosselli, Rosselli, next to Botticelli and Perugino and Ghirlandaio, all the great painters of the time, something about 1490. So there's the picture of Moses. And then our next picture is in the same group of paintings, Moses and the Ten Commandments. So there's another one in that same room in the Sistine. There's Moses up on the mountaintop, and then there are his people all around him. So somewhere around 12 to 1100 is the story of Moses and the Exodus. Now, stop here for a second on archaeology. You all know that there is a huge amount of new archaeological research going on in Israel about all aspects of both Old Testament stories and New Testament. So there's a huge amount of research, both Hebrew Bible and New Testament, and investigation into every single major chapter in this story. It won't surprise you if I tell you that they have not found anything to corroborate the Abraham part of the story. But of course, it would be impossible that they would, because Abraham was nobody when he was called and when he came and when he journeyed. He's a nomad. So there's no likelihood that we have some local newspaper publishing a story about, Abraham's coming down today. Nobody would have cared if they'd been publishing a newspaper somewhere in Nineveh, but they weren't. What about Egypt and the Exodus? Well, again, we have no clear archaeological evidence to say, oh yes, here's the proof. Moses and the Israelites were here, and then they left, and they went across the sea, and this was the little boathouse they built when they got on the other side. Nothing like that. But absence of evidence is not evidence. The fact that we haven't found something doesn't prove anything. Obviously, this is not a famous group of people. This is not a huge group of people, and therefore there might not be any reason for anyone in Egypt to write down X number of people left Egypt tomorrow. There are some things in the records that can be interpreted as referring to Israelites in Egypt and working as slaves in certain occupations. So there is some suggestion that we can corroborate that they were there. But the fact that we don't have some, desert discovery, let's say the tablets, let's say some archaeologists found the tablets. We don't have them. But the fact that we don't have them doesn't really prove that this is all a fiction. Now, you'll say to me, well, are people suggesting it's a fiction? Yes. Yes. Some of you know that. Some of you have been in my classes, have heard this before. There is a very famous Jewish archaeologist in Israel, in Jerusalem, named Israel Finkelstein. And Israel, isn't it nice that he'd have Israel's first name? I mean, my God, what a horrible thing this is that he's out there doing. But anyway, Israel Finkelstein, and he has written books suggesting the Exodus is a fiction. Never happened. The later Jews dreamed it all up for some reason. Now, the archaeologists who are less skeptical, and one name I'll give you, so it's nice for you to know if you want to look into some of this. A name that is nice to know is Kenneth Kitchen. You can't forget his name because it's such a nice name to remember. Kenneth Kitchen. I always remember him because my dearest friend in Italy always mixed up chicken and kitchen in English. He was very good in English, but he mixed up those two words. So every time he talked in English to us, anytime he had to use the word kitchen or chicken, he reversed them. So he was always going into the chicken to cook the kitchen. So we had, broiled kitchen and barbecued kitchen. In any case, now you'll remember Kenneth Kitchen, who is the grand man of English biblical archaeology, has written many books, including a great book on the archaeology of the Bible, Kenneth Kitchen, and he at University of Liverpool, and he says that the idea that the Jews would have invented this fiction is ludicrous because there's nothing good in it. It's not that you want to tell people you were slaves in Egypt and that you want to boast everybody how you were slaves in Egypt, enslaved in Egypt. So why dream this up? Why make this fiction? So that's his take. But there are other things. There are other things that suggest it really happened. In any case, by 1000, which is the date of King David, and we have King David on the screen, by 1000, King David is the king of Israel and is the great figure, David and Solomon, for a high point of ancient Israel, for a high point of the kingdom and for a largest amount of territory, for the greatest unification, etc. And David is corroborated by archaeological discoveries, specifically 1993, Abraham Barron, one of the greatest of Israel's archaeologists who has now passed away, but he and his team at Tel Dan, D-A-N, Tel Dan excavation, he found this stele, this stand-up upright inscription that refers to David and his people. So therefore, it's the first archaeological corroboration we ever had of David. You'll all say, well, wait, if this is a king, if this is an important king, why don't we have more? Well, that's easy to explain, and I like to ask questions of myself when I know the answers. So I asked myself that question, and here is the answer. Jerusalem has been twice leveled to the ground by foreign conquerors, and everything of value carried away, including the people. So at multiple times, but two important ones, two complete total levelings to the ground of everything, and intentionally carrying everything off. The Roman destruction, 70 AD, is complete and total, and every valuable thing is carried away. So the ability for ancient Israel to preserve records and documents is, as you could clearly understand, not possible. It's just not possible given the amount of destruction that's taken place. So that's the answer. But in any case, by 1000, we know King David, and we know King David and Solomon well, and we know a great deal about him and other ancestors because the Bible preserves the most detailed, unvarnished stories of these people, of any of ancient literature, of any people. The willingness of the ancient Israelites to preserve the details of the character of David is extraordinary. And no other literature in the ancient world is anything like this. As you know, if you've read it, David's story is one of a very, very good man and a very, very brilliant man who, when he was young, must have looked just like Michelangelo thought he did, right? Must have been. And then when he grew up and got married and got to be king, he was a very bad man. And all of the things that he did are preserved in excruciating, painful, terrible detail. So that's how we know so much about. I went by Jericho, but let's just go back for just a second to Jericho. Joshua at the Battle of Jericho. This is a map showing you where Jericho is. This is an actual contemporary photograph of Jericho. I call it to your attention because, number one, it's a very, very disputed chapter in the story of the ancient Israelites, disputed by Finkelstein, who says there never was a battle, there never was an invasion, the ancient Israelites didn't pit the Battle of Jericho. The other thing about Jericho that's so interesting is it is one of the most extensively researched ancient cities in the whole world and the oldest continuously occupied city anywhere. Now, different other cities dispute that and say, oh, well, there were a couple of years when nobody lived there. Don't bother with those other cities. You know, Cupertino is not older than Jericho. But this city has received spectacular, brilliant, unbroken study since the end of World War II. And so what we know now about ancient Jericho is rich and great and fascinating. And if you want to read about it, go read Kathleen Kenyon, Kenyon, Kathleen Kenyon, who is the grande dame of archaeology. starting after World War II and working until not so long ago, and then writing a book on ancient. Then we come to David. Something like 1000 BC. You can read all about it in 1st and 2nd book of Samuel. And you can see David's kingdom was great. And also I put up there so that you can know, if you would like a great book about King David, go get Jonathan Kirsch's spectacular study of David and the archaeology and the literature and the Bible, all of it together. Wonderful book.